assumption in a lot of the discourse around a future trading relationship that 0 for 0 tariffs are a given, that it's automatic. But I don't think, I'm not as comfortable with that as others. I think the EU will face very, very strong internal pressure to say, well, if we do have a no deal, if we are starting from a place of WTO terms, why don't we treat this like any other free trade agreement negotiation where there are some tariffs we are willing to cut, such as in industrials. There may be some agricultural products that we are willing to cut, but we do not simply, as a basis, as move one of the chess game, put on the table 0 for 0 tariffs. So I think agricultural market access and defensiveness will definitely be one of them. I'll probably expand this kind of notion of standards and regulations. The EU is sometimes described as a regulatory superpower. Compared to US and China, they have placed a lot of their kind of soft power view of the world in this ability that once the EU has set a standard or regulation, that begins to define their region. In addition to what David said, the EU has a very strong interest in that when it establishes a standard or regulation, those often involve some cost to EU businesses. The EU has a strong interest that as many people as possible also have to adopt, as many countries as possible have to adopt that standard and regulation, so they can't be undercut by partners that don't follow that regulation, that produce in a less costly, but perhaps, I don't know, less environmentally sensitive or less labor-friendly way. The third point I make is if you examine the way that the UK talks about what it wants out of future trade agreements and trade policy in general, you can transpose that onto the EU. When either major party in the United Kingdom at the Westminster level talks about trade, they talk about jobs, and they talk about attracting good, high-paying jobs. They want to take back control of their policies in such a way that they can structure their economy to attract jobs and capital into the United Kingdom. As I think it was Ivan Rogers said, the one thing about taking back control is that the other side gets to take back control too. And so there is if you are in the European Union, if I was an EU member state, or if I was advising the EU member state, I would be looking at the kind of jobs that are currently being done in the United Kingdom and on-sold into the EU, or which rely on access into the EU, and looking at, are there ways that we can, without being massively disruptive and without hurting our own economies, structure our standards, regulations, and trade policy in a way that creates nudge factors to move those jobs to Ireland, to Luxembourg, to you name it. And so I think what you will find is that they will look for opportunities to do that in sectors like finance, where where part of the competitive advantage of UK firms has been the fact that you can use them as a gateway into Europe. Now, if that gateway becomes a tighter squeeze, will firms look to base their capital in EU member states or countries with greater access to EU member states? I think that's a real possibility. And I think it's fair to expect the European Union to approach this with the exact same kind of interest base as the UK does, which is, how do we get these good jobs? How do we get these capital?
Thanks for watching. If you're interested in more trade explainers or in some trade policy or negotiations training for your organization, please check out my website, ExplainTrade.com. I also tweet at Dmitry Opines. Until next time, everyone.